The ACC hasn't had a Heisman Trophy winner in almost a decade. Does the drought break this year?
You are Locked On ACC, your daily podcast on the Atlantic Coast Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Shout out to the everydayers for making Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. He's Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack. I am Alex Donno from Locked On Canes. On this episode, we're going to talk about the insane money that SMU has raised since they joined the ACC. Pony Express is back, baby. We're going to talk about Rece Davis has picked his sleeper team inside the ACC. Who does the college Gameday host, I should say, who does he think could surprise people this coming season? But also, Kenton, we're starting to chatter a little bit more about Heisman Trophy hopefuls. And if you look at in the big picture where ACC players stand preseason, the outlook is not very good. FanDuel Sportsbook, which is the official sportsbook of Locked On, has the ACC's highest preseason rated Heisman contender as Miami quarterback Cam Ward at plus 2,200. So that would mean a $100 bet. A winning $100 bet would win you $2,200, but he's 10th overall in the country. Now, they do have Riley Leonard, who's not technically an ACC quarterback, obviously being at Notre Dame now. Some of the sites try to group him into the ACC, even though he was with the ACC last year. Riley Leonard has the 9th best odds. Other than that, it's a lot of Big Ten, a lot of SEC. The top odds is for Carson Beck at Georgia, and Quinn Ewers at Texas has the 2nd best odds. But if you just look at the Atlantic Coast Conference, On3 Sports wrote a piece. Jesse Simonton from On3 Sports wrote about the top 5 Heisman Trophy contenders inside the ACC. And he does agree with the odds makers having Miami's Cam Ward at number 1. Now, he groups in independent as well because he's got Riley Leonard at number 2, which is not, if he wins, the ACC cannot celebrate that with him being at Notre Dame. Grayson McCall from NC State comes in at number 3. Kyron Drones from Virginia Tech comes in at number 4. And Preston Stone at that very rich program in Dallas at SMU comes in at number 5. But, it's not too unconventional, Kenton. Coming off the last 2 years that Cam Ward had at Washington State, it is kind of chalk at this point to think that he may be the guy in the ACC who's got the best shot at it.
Yeah, when you look at Cam Ward, we often talk about how high his ceiling is and all those types of things, but we also need to look at how the Heisman is won, right? Because there are dynamics at play beyond how good a player is or is not into whether or not he wins a Heisman. If you look at the last few Heismans, right? Jaden Daniels, Heisman winner, or quarterback put up gaudy numbers. Caleb Williams, quarterback, gaudy numbers. Bryce Young, quarterback, best team in the country. Devontae Smith, receiver, best team in the country. Joe Burrow, quarterback, best team in the country. Kyler Murray, quarterback, gaudy numbers. So what does that say? You have to have certain criteria that make it clear that you're going to be a guy who can win the Heisman. One of them is you either have to be a passer or pass catcher. And the second one is that you either have to be a champion or a guy who's putting up video game numbers. For Cam Ward, I can see him putting up video game numbers. You and I have talked ad nauseum about if he can get the turnovers under control, he will likely, with this cast that he's got at Miami, put up some crazy numbers. We all talk about X and how good he is. This young man is a wide receiver who is not black, but nobody says is sneaky athletic. That's how good he is. That's how good the brother is, okay? Because everybody else, if you are not, if you didn't get to celebrate Juneteenth all the way through, they are not calling you. They're going to call you sneaky athletic as a wide receiver. You can get over.
And by the way, the other buzzword on that is when people talk about intangibles.
Yeah, and nobody talks about. Even though we all know Xavier Restrepo was an extremely hard worker, when you talk about him, everybody literally talks about he has separation for days. We talk about the fact that he's more quick than fast, but he's plenty fast. He's plenty fast and can stretch the field vertically. So in essence, what we're looking at here is a situation where Cam Ward has all of the weapons around him to put up gaudy numbers, and he's coming to the ACC at a really good time to where he's going to have Heisman moments if he can get it done against a Florida State. He's going to have Heisman moments if he can dominate Florida to start the season. No, he's going to have moments that you can look at and you can say, hey, Cam's the guy. He did the thing that a lot of these other guys objectively don't have.
And I think if Cam Ward has a legit shot to win the Heisman Trophy, and even though he may have the best odds within the ACC, his odds are not great compared to the other top contenders. But if he's going to have a legit shot to win it, you outlined some of the criteria there. I think that there would be two paths for Ward to win the Heisman. One of them would be, he plays really well, but Miami also has an awesome season. It doesn't always work out this way. Like Jaden Daniels, like you mentioned, he won it last year because he was putting video game numbers. It wasn't because LSU was the best team in the country, because they weren't.
Absolutely.
The quarterback had to win it because he was putting up video game numbers. But then a lot of times you'll see, hey, the best player on one of the best teams win the Heisman. Now, again, like obviously Miami, you'd be talking about Miami making a big jump from 7 wins last year to maybe 10 or 11 wins this year. That would be one path. If Ward has a really strong season on a really good Miami team, and let's say he has a great game against Florida State and a great game against Florida, you need to have those Heisman moments against rivals. Yeah. That's one path. The other path, like you said, would be putting up video game numbers. Now, if he does that, like I think he can put up good numbers, but if he's putting up video game numbers, that's probably not a good sign for Miami, Kenton, because Miami would like to win games with a balanced
attack. Yeah.
A balanced attack. And also, if Ward's putting up video game numbers this year, it probably means you're playing from behind a lot. So if that were to be the path for a Heisman for him, you're probably talking about, Miami maybe going 8-4, but Ward putting up video game numbers. So I think it'd be a better thing for Miami if he, if he can make himself a Heisman contender or Heisman finalist, because he's playing really well on a really good team this year. A couple of quick facts when it comes to Heisman winners and ACC Heisman winners. I mentioned at the top, it's been almost a decade. Lamar Jackson, that was a guy who put up video game numbers. He was the last winner in the ACC. 2016, Lamar Jackson won it at Louisville. And then, you talked about being either a passer or a pass catcher. Running backs don't win this award very often, Kenton. In the old days, they did. Yeah. But not since Derrick Henry in 2015 has a running back won the Heisman Trophy. So I'm wondering, somebody like Omarion Hampton at North Carolina, or even Damien Martinez at Miami, could someone like that sneak into the mix? But it's not been a big running back award over the last 20 or so years.
So let's talk about it, right? If you talk about the running backs that have won it in the last 20 years, you go from 2003 all the way up to now. Do you know how many running backs have won it in that time?
2?
3. Reggie Bush, Mark Ingram, Derrick Henry. What do all 3 of those guys have in common? Besides being Heisman winners, of course. National championship
teams. Yeah.
National championship teams. If you're a running back, video game numbers aren't enough. They're not enough. And not only that, what is considered video game numbers for a running back are so freakish, we will never see it again, I don't believe. And that's not a slight to the talent of running backs or the caliber of running backs that we see now. It is truly a credit to how far the game has come in many respects, because do you think that we'll ever see a running back get 2,600 yards again? That's what Barry Sanders did. Barry Sanders did.
Insane.
A guy doing that, trust me, I'm a Lions fan. I know my Barry Sanders history. But the reality of this matter is a running back's only path, Damien Martinez or Omarion Hampton. Damien Martinez has an exponentially higher chance. And I know people are going to say, okay, you just want to take one out on old UNC. But let's be honest. Who do you think has a better chance at being a serious contender in not just the ACC, but nationally this year? The Miami Hurricanes, the UNC Tar Heels. Let's be very honest with ourselves. Complete bias aside, I'm taking my Wolfpack tinted red glasses off. Objectively, this is not really a case where Omarion comes close. Now, can Omarion win the Doak? Would I say he's more likely to win the Doak than Martinez? Absolutely. Yeah. But if you're talking about the Heisman, as a running back, you have to carry the load and be a guy that's on a national championship team, or else they'll find a way for one of those quarterbacks who's in the national championship conversation, came into the year with a little bit of hype. He'll get it. It'll go to him, and that'll be all there is to it.
Well, I want to continue this conversation because there are a few other ACC quarterbacks who are on that list that are getting a little attention, right? Maybe sleeper Heisman candidates. We'll talk about a sleeper ACC pick as well when we come back. Alex Donno from Locked On Canes, Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack. Folks, we are only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On ACC. You want to keep it locked. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Thank you so much for making this episode of Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. We love the Locked On Network, and Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV Channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Amazon Fire TV Channels app. So, Kenton, interestingly enough, after Ward, the next Heisman hopeful from the ACC that gets listed is NC State's Grayson McCall, who transferred in. And funny, the top two guys are both transfers. Ward transferred to Miami from Washington State. Grayson McCall transferred to NC State from Coastal Carolina. This is someone, you've covered and watched during spring football. Are you starting to buy the hype a little bit that McCall could be a sleeper?
So McCall has many things working for him that people don't realize in terms of Heisman buzz. For whatever reason, as much as NC State folks like to believe that, like, hey, the nation hates you, I disagree. The ACC may hate you. Yes, the ACC officiating and whatnot, they may have it out for you. But nationally, you're a white hat school. What does that mean? When you're good, people root for you. There's black hats and there's white hats in the world. Generally, to get a black hat, you have to be perennially good, or there has to be some major scandal where y'all did terrible things to people over an extended period of time. NC State is a white hat school. With that being said, if Grayson McCall leads this team to undefeated, if he leads this team to 11 wins, something like that, an ACC championship, people are going to be saying, wait a minute, what's going on over there? And unless that multi-headed running back room pops out and dominates, it's very likely that Grayson McCall will be the guy that's most likely to represent NC State in New York at the end of the year. So with that being said, I mean, I'm not surprised by him being a guy who has pretty high odds, because as much as I love KC, it's really hard for a wide receiver to win the Heisman. If you're a wide receiver winning the Heisman, not only do you either have to be a record-breaking receiver on a juggernaut team that everybody knows is going to win a national championship, or you have to do it in the return game. You got to do it as a receiver. You got to do it a little bit in the running game, which KC has shown us he can do it in the running game. He can do it as a pass catcher. If you put him back that returner, I'm sure he could. But why would you need him to do that many things if you're NC State? You've got a ton of other guys that can handle those responsibilities in terms of Dylan Smothers and Jonathan Paylor and company, who can handle those return responsibilities and a much better backfield than you had last year. So you wouldn't expect him to be doing as much as a runner. So, the reality is, if you are looking at somebody who's likely to represent NC State there, it's absolutely Grayson McCall. But even going forward, if you look at somebody who's likely to represent the ACC, I like Grayson McCall here, but I think the guy behind him has a little bit better of a chance than he does.
And that guy behind him is Virginia Tech signal caller Kyron Drones, who, you saw the difference that he made when he took over midseason last year, and some of the expectations that the Hokies don't have like, Clemson, Florida State, and Miami type of expectations, but the Hokies do have an expectation to improve big time from last year, and Drones is the biggest reason for that.
Let me tell you something. Kyron Drones is special. He's one of those quarterbacks that I watch play, and I say, being retired ain't so bad. Being on this side of the game ain't bad. It ain't bad, because every time you think, oh, man, we got him. No, you don't. And not only most quarterbacks that are always breaking tackles and all that, you think about guys who are elusive and quick and shifty, like a Kyler Murray, like a Lamar Jackson. He does it in the way that Cam Newton did a little bit. There's a power to him. Even when he's juking you, there's a power to Kyron Drones where it's like, man, that's a big fella. That's a load to bring down there. And then on top of that, he is a guy that I think as he gets more comfortable in that offense, as he trusts his pass catchers more, and his pass catchers become more trustworthy, to be honest, they will be better. He will have the opportunity to do some special things, especially against the schedule that, it's not the toughest in the world. Not the toughest in the world by any stretch of the imagination. And anybody who knows my rule for transfer quarterbacks, do not expect immediate success, or at least don't expect the highest level of success in year one. You always, or not always, but generally, you need two. It takes two every time. It takes 2 years. That first year, they're getting their lab legs wet. They're figuring it out. That second year is where they flourish and shine and become all the things. Who could have predicted what Joe Burrow was going to become based on year one?
Right. Yeah, that's true. That's a great point.
But then in year two, he shows up, he shows out, he dominates, right? Kyler Murray, same thing at Texas A&M. Same thing at Oklahoma. He was not a guy who showed up on campus, immediately dominated. It took a year, and then the second year, when he took over as the guy, he came in and showed exactly who he was. Unless it's a situation like Caleb Williams where the system is transferring with you, you're not in a situation generally where you're going to have a lot of success year one. Justin Fields and Cam Newton are probably the only exceptions to that. And both of those guys are studs to the highest degree in terms of talent and ability. Kyron Drones, I think, is a notch below them, but he's going into year two. Let's see how he can do in this second year.
And I could see Drones putting up video game numbers because he's such a dual threat. I mean, he rushed for almost 1,000 yards last year. So you would expect that, and he only threw 3 interceptions to 17 touchdowns. So you can expect him to put up prolific numbers both through the air and on the ground, which means the total yardage is going to be really high. People love that stat of, all-purpose yards. And the overall touchdowns, if you combine the rushing with the passing, those stats are going to be high. So again, I don't expect him to win the Heisman, but that could be something that could make him a contender if he puts up video game numbers. And then another, important factor when you talk, having a great story is another thing. And I can say Cam Ward, if he has a really good year this year, he would have a great story. I mean, this guy, you look at how talented he is, somehow was barely recruited coming out of high school, had to start his career at Division II Incarnate Word. He works his way from Incarnate Word to Washington State to Miami. I mean, it's a great story. I think he's carried a little bit of a chip on his shoulder ever since he came out of high school. McCall and Drones have great stories as well. Those would really be like rags to riches types of stories, going from where their teams were before, especially in the case of Drones, if he can really pull off a great season. Could be some great stories. The Heisman stories are always very important. And listen, maybe if NC State has the type of season that Rece Davis, College Gameday host, thinks that they're going to have, maybe there is something to be said about Grayson McCall. So Rece Davis on the College Gameday podcast, he named NC State as his sleeper team in the ACC for this year. Kudos to the Clemson Insider for transcribing this. He says, NC State would be the first one that comes to mind from the ACC for me. They may be preseason top 25 anyway, Davis said, but with the addition of Grayson McCall, they've got a really good receiver room now. I think Casey Concepcion, their slot receiver, I think he was the ACC Rookie of the Year last year. He was very productive. They've added some guys through the portal. I think they'll be fine up front. They're usually solid on defense. So he's got NC State as a sleeper to watch this year.
Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense because, you talk about the defense and Tony Gibson, he's always going to put out a solid defense. They may not be the best in the nation. You could give Tony Gibson 6 clones of you and me each, and he'd find a way to work it out so that they end up in the top half of the ACC. Now,
Yes.
Donno, you're gonna have to do some heavy lifting on the back end, brother. I'm just letting you know. But with Tony Gibson coaching you up, I think he can make it happen. But in all seriousness, the big thing about NC State is something else that he said in that article. If they can stop stepping on the rake, right? What does that mean? It means proverbially getting in your own way. It means proverbially losing games you're not supposed to lose. It means proverbially turning one loss where it's like, man, this was a close loss. It was a tough loss. It was a loss to a great team. Letting that loss trickle into 2, 3, 4 losses. Now all of a sudden you're out of it. You're out of it because you let one loss turn into 2, and that 2 turned into 3, and now you're in a bad situation. You never want to have that happen, but historically, NC State has been the kings of that. I have seen it first person. I've been a part of it, for Christ's sake. I know that's a very real thing with NC State. If they can have the countenance to win the games that they're supposed to win, and even the ones that you're quote-unquote supposed to lose, let that be that one loss and don't let it linger, they have an excellent shot at making it to Charlotte and beyond. Because, again, this is a really good team. They have everything that they need in terms of a running back room that is deep and talented. A wide receiver room. I don't think we've seen a singular position group in the country hit a 180 the way that NC State did from last year to this year. That wide receiver room was so devoid of talent. You could throw a rock in there and you were more likely to hit an accountant than a guy who would get a camp invite. That's the reality of what you were looking at there. So, you go forward from there. You look at the offensive line, like you said, they're good up front, good in the running back room, exponentially improved at the wide receiver position. All you're hoping for is, again, Grayson McCall can return to the Grayson McCall of old, make good decisions, get the ball out on target on time, not asking you to be Superman, not asking you to be a 5,000-yard passer. Get the ball out on time, on target, have a running game that is good enough, and they could definitely see themselves in Charlotte.
So the fifth member of that list of ACC Heisman hopefuls is the SMU quarterback, Preston Stone. We have to talk about SMU because this is some of the most impressive fundraising in college football history, college sports history, I should say, is going on in Dallas right now. You want to keep it locked right here. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On ACC. So this is pretty remarkable, Kenton Gibbs. This has been reported throughout the day today, according to Front Office Sports. SMU has raised through boosters and I would imagine ticket sales, because apparently they're setting records for season tickets next year through boosters and ticket sales. SMU has raised a massive $159 million in 2023, 2024. And for reference here, because this was sent out by Texas Football Life, they say SMU Athletics has just announced that they raised $159 million in 23-24. For reference, Texas A&M led the nation with $115 million raised last year. So the team from Dallas said to the team from College Station, hold my beer or hold my oil can, because we're gonna up you on that total.
This brings me back to Kendrick Lamar a lot because, number one, he just had a concert on Juneteenth called the Pop Out. And sometimes you got to pop out and show folks what you can do. And that's definitely what SMU has done here, because they're saying that Money Trees are the perfect place for shade, because this team is coming into a new conference. They already were in a situation where they had to pay a buyout to the American Conference to join the ACC because they weren't at the end of a contract. On top of that, you're looking at a situation where they could not take a full cut because, again, they're coming in as a limited member. So to think about that, you say, how can they bridge that gap? How can they do it? They were going to need a massive infusion of cash. And where was that cash going to come from? Well, shout out to the boosters. Shout out to the donors. Shout out to the new Sherwood Blunts of the world. Still free Sherwood Blunt till it's backwards. The Pony Express is back, okay? The Pony Express is back in the building. And I'll tell you what, on the field, they do have an electric team in terms of Preston Stone at the head of Rhett Lashley's offense. And you would rarely see a quarterback and head coach as perfectly matched up as Preston and Rhett. Those two, they have that type of back and forth relationship. They feed off of each other. They boost each other because that offense is dynamic, because Preston has that moxie about him, that bravado that says, I'm going to do what I need to do, how I need to do it. But it's a quiet bravado. It's not something that's loud, that's overbearing. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but do you not get that same feeling for Brett Lashley? Do you not get that same feeling like he knows he's the guy? He just doesn't have to tell you.
I know.
Every 3 seconds.
I covered him at Miami. For sure, he's like that.
Yeah, so those two seem like a match made in heaven. And I'll tell you what, this team mixed in with that Dallas old tradition, that old money, seems like a match made in heaven as well, because what a job. What a job by them to raise this money to keep themselves economically viable in a situation that is tough. This is not an easy jump at all. And you're jumping during this time where, hey, congratulations, extra $20 million bill on your doorstep. It's a situation that no team would look at and say, hey, this is easy and tenable for most of the group of five. And yet SMU is doing it flawlessly.
And wouldn't you say that this might be maybe motivation for other schools in the ACC and Big 12? And again, like I'm not saying Florida State's Board of Trustees should see this and say, you know what? No, forget about leaving the ACC. The answers lie within. I'm not saying that. I understand why Florida State and Clemson and whoever else want to get out. But, you know, for those who may be stuck in the situation that they're in, maybe you could say, you know what? Maybe we need to up our fundraising game. Maybe we need to be more like SMU, because they're making up. And like you said, not only are they in the ACC, they have a revenue gap even within the ACC, not getting a full cut, or I think are they not even getting any cut the first couple of years?
I don't believe they're getting any cut the first couple of years.
So,
and then even when they start getting it, it's a partial cut. So
yes, exactly. So this is really their only option, but they just went out there and apparently set a fundraising record. So this might be some motivation for some other schools who are in a situation where they are not on a level playing field financially.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt about that. More often than not, and not just for the schools who want to get out, for schools who are thinking about turning to private equity, more often than not, the answer is more likely internal than external. Again, I say this as my normal job as a recruiter, right? And more often than not, when I go into a company and they ask me, hey, we need these positions filled, yada, 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 the first thing I say is, do you have somebody on your team that you can feel comfortable promoting to that position? Because the person that you're getting them to replace, or the position you're getting them to fill, if that is above the position they're currently at, you can get them on a discount, and you can hire somebody into their position pretty cheaply as well, as opposed to hiring this more senior person. I'm saying all that to say, more often than not, it is less risky, and you are looking at a better situation if you seek that funding internally, if it is possible, if it is feasible to get that funding internally. That's where you need to be looking.
Yeah, no, well said. And a good place to leave it off for this episode. He's Kenton Gibbs. Locked on Wolfpack is where you find his other show. I am Alex Donno. Locked on Canes is the other place you can find me. And we will talk to everyone again next time on another episode of Locked on ACC. We are part of the awesome Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.